So after about 79 hours, 31 minutes, and 11 seconds, I have finally beaten Lies of P. For those unfamiliar with this game, this is a Pinocchio-inspired, Bloodborne-inspired, Sekiro-inspired, FromSoft-inspired, everything-inspired, new Souls-like game that released on September 19th. And if you don't know what a Souls-like game is, then I'm happy for your mental health, but I also don't know how to explain it to you. You kind of just have to play one. But before I get into this review, I just want to say that for some reason my clipping software that I use to record gameplay moments has for some reason decided to shit the bed on me recently. I've tried every Google solution available. If anybody knows how to fix the NVIDIA instant replay from turning off by itself and just not clipping things, please let me know in the comments. But due to the fact that the clipping software was affecting me, some of the criticisms or even praise that I give this game, I may not be able to show visual footage. I even spent the whole last 2 hours of the game thinking my clipping software was working just fine, then come to find out all the clips are just a black screen with audio. And then finally, the last disclaimer is that there will be spoilers in this video, so if you care for the narrative, I'd recommend skipping the story segment, or if you just care not to be spoiled for really anything in the game, just come back to this video when you beat the game or something. So without further ado, let's get into the first category. So I'm someone who usually doesn't care about the narratives in these types of games, but I can't lie, this game's world had me pretty invested the whole way through. I think it does take more of a story focus than, not to say it's really story focused, but it takes more of a story focus than a lot of other Souls-like games I've played. Now that's not to say that this game has the greatest narrative or anything, I just think it was pretty solid. There's a great theme throughout the world of greed and lying and how it has ruined the lives of this world. For example, this boss's greed caused him to turn into this thing, and his lies, saying that he came from a one-winged angel, caused him to actually turn into a one-winged angel mixed with a centipede or some shit. I don't even know what to call this. And then there's these two characters throughout the world, the fox and the cat. They had been lying, saying that the cat was blind, so they would use that to turn people's empathy against them and manipulate them. And then later in the story, the cat actually wound up becoming blind, progressively. And while staying on the same characters, they actually have something that I like about this world. The characters that I expected to be bad in this world actually mostly all wound up being good or decent people. For example, the fox and the cat actually wound up not being bad people by the end of the story. They may have done a couple messed up things, but they're not really bad people. Unlike someone like Alidoro, who I thought was good, but we later find out that he killed his partner and took his identity. And then this other guy, Giorgio, I thought was gonna be bad, and he wound up actually being good, while Geppetto, the person I'm sure everyone thought was gonna be good, wound up being bad as well. I also really enjoyed uncovering the mystery of the world and how the puppet frenzy started, and just basically how this world went to shit. This game also features the Riddler.
Riddle me this, Batman. What is long, hard, and has cum in the middle? A penis. No, the answer is cucumber!
But these riddles were pretty harmless fun throughout a couple of the levels, and by the end of this, we actually found out that this puppet that was giving us the riddles was actually the same puppet that killed Vignini's parents. But this story isn't without criticism, as there's some really fucking dumb shit here. For starters, if the puppets have been mass-produced and put into positions where they would take a lot of jobs, obviously, then why didn't they take this opportunity to use this element, maybe have a couple people in the world being affected by losing their jobs or something of that nature? We don't really see anything like that. The second thing is there's a side quest in this game that has this guy make us go fetch a wedding ring from his dead wife, or he knew she was dead. But when we found his wife, she turned out to be a puppet. But somehow, some way, this guy didn't know that his wife was a puppet. How, bruh? Do I even need to explain how dumb this is? Did these puppets have pussies? Does he not hear the machinery of his wife? I have so many questions on this with no answer from the game. The third thing is Lady Antonia had a secret passage to the Alchemist Island this whole time. Yet, she chooses not to tell us about it, despite us needing to get there, earlier in the story. I get she's probably, an old, senile old lady, but, bro, how do you just so happen to realize, hey, I got this secret passage now and not earlier? What the fuck? The fourth thing is we also have this gold coin fruit tree which can cure any disease. And this tree has been at the hotel this whole game, yet for some reason we only get this later in the story, when it could have been used to cure Lady Antonia before her disease got worse. I'm sorry, but you can't tell me that not a single person at this hotel didn't know this tree was there. And then the fifth thing is, why does Pinocchio fight the King of Puppets? And I'm assuming that the main character's name is Pinocchio. But the King of puppets actually was trying to communicate with him and like befriend him, but for some reason I guess Pinocchio can't understand him, and they never explain why he can't understand him. And if he can understand him, then again, why even fight to begin with if we need information and he's offering friendship? The sixth thing is that Simon is just a cartoonishly evil villain. He wants to be immortal and take over the world or whatever. I think the only thing interesting about his character is that he wants to create a world without lies due to his father lying and betraying him, but we still barely even interact or see much of him throughout the story. He's just a pretty boring character. And then finally, my biggest criticism for this story is like, so if Geppetto wants his son to come back to life, then what is the reason for him starting the puppet frenzy? Like, how does this help him accomplish his goals in any way? And also, before we rescue him from the alchemist or whatever, we find out that he was the one that started the puppet frenzy, yet we don't question him on this after arriving at his cell. But back on track here, there's no logical reason I see for him starting this puppet frenzy, and if his goal was to bring his son back to life using all this ergo, then why didn't he just work with Simon? And how does Geppetto even know that Pinocchio was alive if he's like this key part of his plan or whatever? Geppetto wasn't the one that revived Pinocchio, it was Sophia. So if his plan to bring back his son relies on Pinocchio having his son's memories, then I'm just sitting here like, what the, like, his plan, he's so dumb. And there's nothing in this game that Geppetto does behind the scenes that we learn in these later reveals that, like, benefit his goals in any way. I can't even give this game the benefit of the doubt by saying that Geppetto wouldn't work with Simon because of the type of person he is or something like that, because Geppetto is willing to do so fucking, like, so much fucked up shit just to get his son back, so it would make no sense that he wouldn't work with Simon. There's just so much wrong with his, like, this character. It's like, I think he had solid motives, but the way that they were executed in this story is just awful. And also, like, why don't we get more information on, like, what specifically happened to his son Carlo? Like, we know he died, but, like, we don't really get more than just, like, basic information on how that came to be. Anyways, besides these criticisms, I still think it was a pretty solid story and an interesting world. In the post-credit scene, it looks like they're setting up the Wizard of Oz, so that should be an interesting next game. Maybe we'll fight the Wicked Witch of the West and we'll have a boss fight where she shoves her broomstick up Dorothy's ass. But if you guys disagree with some of my criticisms, or if I got something wrong or I missed some of the lore, let me know in my comments. But moving on from the story, on the gameplay, level design, and, like, game design front, I always, like, I don't know how to put these categories together. I just kind of, they're just there. But on this front, this game is absolutely incredible. As I mentioned in the beginning, this game takes heavy inspiration from Bloodborne as well as Sekiro. To start off with the level design first, I think literally every single level in this game is good. You're constantly being introduced to new enemy designs, both on the visual front and the mechanical front. They got everything from zombies, dickhead, there's no fucking way, to suey bombing dogs. Now watch this 300 IQ play. To these guys who you may think want to give you a hug, but they really just want to hit you with the fucking WWE Smackdown. This game also has a really good atmosphere, and there's, like, some really cool jump scares that'll really, like, fuck with you. And there's just random things in the level that will, like, fuck with you. Like, sometimes you'll run over a bridge and, like, the thing will collapse behind you after you've already ran over it. And then there's other times where you'll run over a bridge and you'll fall through the bridge. Dickhead. Aw, you fucking bitch! I hate this game. And then there was this other time, and I still remember it. It was, I think I got the clip, but I was running up behind a guy that I thought I had, like, an easy run up on, and then there was a bear trap on the floor, because they knew I was gonna fucking do that. So I think just little details like that are really cool. And while we're talking about the same level, the swamp level, I'm assuming most of you have, like, that are watching this right now have played the game. But the swamp level was easily my favorite. I even met this cool guy. Ah, man, what a view. Man, you ain't telling me it was like this up here. I mean, you really do, like, just sometimes you just gotta take in the scenery. It's just nice. Hey, you got some of your back here. You're also just constantly being put into new environments with different types of topology. And while we're talking about the visual front of this game, the art direction of this game is incredible. They even got a fucking red lobster in this bitch. But all of the levels get progressively more challenging, and I'd say all of them are challenging outside of maybe the first two. The first two aren't bad by any means, it's just, they're just not all that difficult. I also like that you're constantly being rewarded, even though there's like not that much exploration, but for the little bits of exploration that this game offers, you are like being rewarded very frequently. It's an extremely linear game with not too many branching paths, but there still are branching paths in these levels. And to move on to like some of those rewards you get as well as the combat, there is a surplus of weapons in this game that you unlock progressively throughout it, and you have plenty of time to experiment and find your playstyle before this game starts to get really like difficult. I even found myself having to switch playstyles around at times to beat some of the bosses in this game, and I've heard a good amount of people say the exact same thing, which means you shouldn't get too comfortable with one style. Some people may like or dislike this, but personally I really like this. Think about how people like to use the excuse for a game like Breath of the Wild. When people mention like weapon durability, the common excuse that I hear for the Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom's weapon durability is that the reason this system's in place is because the game wants us to use more variety in the combat. But I don't think it works for that system, as that game is so piss easy that using the different weapon types in that game don't really affect your combat experience in any meaningful way. While in Lies of P, experimenting with the variety will most definitely change your combat experience and odds against a boss you may have been struggling against, or even just like making it easier to get through a level or a mini boss. And all these weapons have different Fable Arts moves, attack speeds, damage output, charge attacks, attack strings, durability, critical hit rates, damage reduction while guarding, and some of them even have status effect elements like electricity or something. You also have a fucking customizable Winter Soldier arm, and this also has a bunch of different options similar to the weapons. You can upgrade these so that they can do more. I mostly found myself using the electric arm, the fire arm, not like a gun, just like the gun that literally, like an arm that literally shoots fire, the Captain America shield arm, and the puppet string. And the more you upgrade the puppet string, for example, you can get, the more you can do with it. But while this system does have variety in terms of what it has to offer you, you don't actually have all that much variety when you're actually in combat. The most you'll be able to do at a time is like a light attack, a heavy attack, a light attack that you can string into a heavy attack. You have your Fable Arts attack, which you will either have one or two depending on which weapon you're using. You'll also have like a few throwables, but I don't really consider the throwables like consistent variety, as you will lose them and not get them back until you either buy them or find them through killing enemies. So you can't really always rely on having access to them. And then finally, you'll have your Legion arm. And this just isn't a lot of variety when you like that you'll have on you at all times. And this is usually the reason that I tend to think that Souls-like combat systems mostly never hit that 10 out of 10 mark for me, except for Sekiro. Because while the depth of the combat mostly comes from the enemy designs, I just wish there was more stuff to do against the enemies that you have on hand at you at all times. Like Jedi Survivor or Fallen Order, for example, when you have access to a variety of combo strings and force abilities, while also having the same quality of enemy design. That will always just be the better combat system direction in my book. I also really like the crafting system, although it kind of becomes obsolete after you meet Alidoro, as he has access to the best weapons in the game, and after you get those rare weapons, every other weapon is just like a limp noodle. But while we're on the topic of these weapons, I think it's bad that you only meet Alidoro after already beating 3 bosses that had specific ergo that you needed to get these weapons. Not all of them, but like just 3 of them. But why do I think this is bad? Well, it's because this game obviously encourages the player to use its ergo, or use your ergo to upgrade your characters, so why would they not expect someone to use the boss ergo after defeating these bosses? I don't think this is like a major criticism or anything, just something that I thought was annoying because I had no way of knowing like not to use this ergo, and so I missed out on these special enemies like these special weapons like earlier in the game. Another couple criticisms I have with the combat system is, like I said earlier, number one, this game takes inspiration from Sekiro and Bloodborne, but I don't think it hits the strides of either game in one way for both. With Bloodborne, I think the dodging is more smooth and less finicky, and with Sekiro, the parry system feels a lot more fluid, has a better flow, it also feels more responsive, and it just feels like it's more fair in terms of the parry timing. This game's parry timing is like you have to be God himself at points. Like, I'll talk about it later, but like, Jesus. The second thing is, like Sekiro, I think this game could benefit a lot from showing the player the enemy's guard, because, and this is mostly with the boss fights, this game obviously encourages the player to play aggressive, but I'm always left wondering like how aggressive I should be playing, because I can never know for sure when I'll have the opportunity to get like a fatal blow, because I don't know if like I've been parrying enough, like to the point where I'm about to get like access to the fatal blow. The third thing is that if this game wants me to play aggressively, then what's the need for this stamina meter? All it does is make me play less aggressive and more methodical, so like, if you want me to play aggressive, then I don't understand the choice here. And another thing about this is like, why does some enemy attacks, like from some enemies or bosses, they'll like push you back even when you perfectly parry, and that will force you to lose stamina by running back at them? Like, why am I being punished for parrying perfectly? And it's especially annoying when you parry perfectly and it pushes you back, and but at that time you'll have like an opportunity for like a fatal attack if you do have that option, and like you'll have to waste time running back at them, and you may lose your chance to get the fatal attack, because as soon as you run back at them, they might get right back into like an attack string. So shit like that was just really annoying. And I'm aware that cannonballs will open up a fatal blow attack for you, and you can use those from range, but again, throwables aren't something that you're always going to have access to, especially when you're going to be fighting a good amount of these bosses for at least 10 tries, unless you're just a fucking god that beats every boss in like 3 tries. If you're that guy, then you're just that guy, I don't know. But speaking of the bosses, let's talk about them. So I know I play this clip in every review video, but this is my standards for boss fights before I get into like criticizing and talking about the boss fights. And the most important things that make a boss fight great, in my opinion, is number 1, the most important thing for me is, does the character have any emotional weight or impact behind them from like a character perspective? Example, Doc Ock boss fight from Spider-Man PS4. Number 2, this is the second most important thing to me, is it just straight up fun and or challenging? Does the boss have a good variety of moves that keep you on your toes, making the fight more mechanically engaging and things less predictable? For the most recent example I can think of this is a lot of the boss fights from God of War Ragnarok, especially Gina or Na. Number 3, is it visually pleasing, cinematic, or just feel awesome while playing it? And number 4, is it creative and unique from other boss fights? Example, Mr. Freeze boss fight from Arkham City. And if the boss fight doesn't have at least 2 to 3 of these things, depending on like certain context behind situations and said boss fight, then it's a bad and or decent boss fight in my opinion. Like I said, depending on context of certain situations. So for the bosses in Lies of P, I think all the main narrative boss fights are all good to great, so I'll go through them and rate them on a scale of 10 and just give some quick thoughts on them. The Parade Master, I give this one an 8 out of 10. I thought this was a great first boss. It wasn't too challenging, but it was engaging and it had a great design. The second one is the Mad Donkey. I give this one a 7.5 out of 10. This boss was also pretty great. The only reason I don't have it at an 8 is because I think some of the moves are kind of finicky, and he also just wasn't that difficult. Nah, I'm just playing. This boss is a 10 out of 10. It gives you the best outfit in the game. The third boss is the Watchman. I give this one an 8 out of 10. I don't have much to say here. I feel the same way about this boss as I do about the Parade Master, although I do think this boss is slightly more challenging. The fourth boss, the King's Flame, and this is the boss where I start to get into the problems that I see like as a trend for most of the bosses going forward. And these issues can vary, like they can have varying degrees depending on the boss fight. But my issue with this boss is the camera FOV, because some of his moves are really hard to see, so you have to like rely on muscle memory instead of what you're actually seeing. He also has a move that can just randomly happen, and you have to run far as shit from him or you're basically fucked and you're getting hit by it, you're getting an overheat, and you're losing like half your health bar. And again, the range on this move and what it does to you is just completely unfair. I absolutely hated this shit. You can say it's a skill issue, it's not. This shit was just stupid. The fifth boss fight is the Fallen Archbishop Andreas. I give this boss an 8.5 out of 10. This boss in this game made me feel like because the first phase was pretty difficult for me. It was less difficult after I finally beat it. But like, I beat this boss and I was like, I felt like I could breathe. And then he pulled a Guardian Ape on me from Sekiro, and there was a second phase, and I was like, ah, shit. But after playing it for a while, the first phase wasn't really hard. It was the second phase that kind of kept getting me. But this is another boss that I have the same FOV issue from time to time, and it does have one weird move that I think is like, it can be unfair, but then there's other times if you just run around, you can just avoid it, but sometimes it will still hit you even when you are running around. It's just like, there was no clear way on how to stop this move from hitting you at times. I didn't run into this problem too much, but I did run into the FOV problem, like, from time to time again. But I give this boss an 8.5 out of 10. The sixth boss is the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. I give this one a 9 out of 10. This boss was great. My only issue was that, like, sometimes when it turns into a 2v1, for the most part, I think it's generally smart AI that doesn't, like, gang up on you too much, making the boss unfair. But there were times where I was getting comboed by one of the brothers, and Big Doofus would come by swinging his sword like the Kool-Aid man saying, "Oh yeah!" And again, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'm sorry I don't have, like, the my actual gameplay to show better visually what I mean, but I'm still trying to do my best here. Now we get to number 7, the King of Puppets, and oh my god. This boss was just pain. Nothing but pain. I genuinely think this was a great boss fight. I just think the issue with this boss, and the only thing making me not give it a 10 out of 10, is the placement of this boss in the game, because it is a huge difficulty spike. Mind you, at this point in the game, I think you only have around 5 to 6 pulse cells, and you're probably going to lose 2 of them in the first phase. The first phase isn't that difficult. It's that second phase that is really fucking hard. But the first phase is still, like, pretty challenging. It's just the fact that you then have to fight this guy, who is also not insanely difficult until you make him mad and he does this shit.
It's supposed to be a fucking RPG. What role am I playing? The fucking victim? Jesus fucking Christ!
But this boss was more challenging than, like, the next 3 boss fights for me, and nothing before this prepared me in the slightest to fight this guy. So yes, I do think that is an issue and a difficulty spike that apparently it got patched, but my experience with it, the 8th boss is Champion Victor. This is a 10 out of 10 boss fight. I have absolutely no problems with this fight. It was completely fair. It was challenging. It had a cool arena. It was probably the most fun fight I had in this game. And the dude turns into fucking Solomon Grundy in the second phase, was giving me Arkham City PTSD. But instead of when Solomon Grundy would grab you, you'd have to spam A, this boss just does this shit to you and uses you as his fucking personal punching bag. He literally just treats you like a fucking stress pillow. The 9th boss was the Swamp Monster. This boss I also thought was great. I do think it has some issues though. Like, it has one move where it burrows into the ground and you're basically relying on luck if you want to dodge that shit. This boss also has some camera issues and, like, FOV issues that I found really annoying, especially for the small ass arena that it puts you in. But I give this boss an 8 out of 10. The 10th boss is the Black Rabbit the Black Rabbit Brotherhood Part 2. I do think this is worse than the first fight, and my main issue with this fight was the fact that 2 of them sometimes would attack you both at, like, the same time, and they both have different moves, or they all have different movesets. And I literally felt like I was getting gangbanged at points. I think the AI design for this fight was steady for about 70% of the time, but when it fucked up and it just had me getting, like, jumped, I was just like, bruh, what the fuck do you want me to do about this? Do you think I'm Neo or something? Phantom Blade has not come out yet. I was literally just spamming the parry button at times, hoping I could do literally anything. And again, this is another fight where I don't have the visual clips to show better what I mean, but still a great boss fight. I just still think it has some issues. The 11th boss, and, I was talking my shit about King of Puppets, but this is actually the hardest boss in the fucking game. I have 2 issues with this boss though. The first being she has 1 attack in her first phase that is complete bullshit, because I tried dodging this attack left, right, forward, backwards, and the only thing that worked was, and it was only sometimes, and it was when I would dodge forward, and sometimes it still didn't work. And she also has an attack where if you, like, it's kind of like the same sort of animation, but she'll either shoot lightning in front of her or lightning, like, right in front of her. If you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. I should be showing visually what I mean. But when she did the forward attack, I would just be sitting there like, are you serious, my brother? Other than that one move, everything else in her first phase is completely fair, just really challenging still. But then we get to the second phase, and holy fucking shit. You have to be God himself to consistently parry this bitch's attacks. Like, I don't know who they thought was gonna be playing this game, but my name is not fucking Barry Allen, and I did not sign up to fight fucking Thunder Cunt. The only thing you can consistently expect in this fight is using every single pulse cell that you have on you and an ass whooping. I literally beat this boss by pure luck. I just think with a few of the bosses in this game, the parry timing desperately needs, like, at least like a 0.3 second larger window. And this next part doesn't really have everything to do with this boss specifically, so it's a little off topic, and I should have mentioned this earlier, but I was using this katana weapon, and this weapon has a move that if you hold R2, it may or may not parry a move for you. And the reason I say may or may not is because it's so fucking inconsistent. I experimented with this thing so much, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out why it would parry sometimes and why it wouldn't parry sometimes. And that's another one of the reasons why I died to this boss so much. But moving on to the 12th boss fight, Simon, I give this boss a 7 out of 10. This boss was actually very very disappointing to say the least, because he was hyping himself up to be like this god or some shit, but then he just wound up looking like a child, stuck some shit and Play-Doh together, and said, yeah, this is a boss fight. And after fighting these two assholes, this boss fight was cake to me. I beat it in like 3 tries, but even with it being probably the easiest boss in this game, I still think it had some stupid ass moves that I'm just sitting there like, bruh, what am I dead ass supposed to do about that? And he also had some camera FOV issues. It was still a pretty good boss, just kind of disappointing. And then we get to number 13. The Nameless Puppet. I don't think this is the hardest boss in the game, and as much as I have complaints with the parry window and the crazy ass moves in this man's second phase, I still think this is the best boss fight in the game, which is fitting because it is the last boss fight. It took me at least 30 to 40 tries and a weapon swap to beat this fucker. And you know, I was debating on whether I wanted to give this boss like a 9, purely because that parry window is like, again, you have to be God himself at times. But I don't know. I think this boss was generally fair, and it was really challenging, and it had a lot of great moves, and like it really kept you on your toes the whole time. So I give this boss a 10 out of 10. And then for the mini bosses, I'm not really gonna go over through all of them, but this is how I rated all of them. You can just pause to read. I will say, the Puppet of the Future, if you were there during my stream while I was fighting this boss for the first time, it's not even that difficult. It literally, I was just so painfully bored playing this boss fight. This might be the worst boss that I've ever played in my life. I was so painfully bored playing this boss fight that I just kept dying because I was just like, you ever get so bored at something that you just stop giving a fuck? This is how I felt fighting this boss. And that's why I died so many times while I was playing it. But it's not a good boss. It fucking sucks. It is actually terrible. Same with the Door Guardian, just an awful boss fight. But to wrap up my thoughts with this game, I think the level designs are great, the combat is great, the art direction is great, the story is pretty solid, the music was great, the atmosphere was great. There's just so many great things about this game, and for as many times as I wanted to break something while playing this game, I also had a damn good time with it. And while I think it falls short in a couple ways, the problems with this game aren't too crazy in comparison to the good and the great things that this game has to offer. So I give Lies of P around an 8.5 to a 9 out of 10. It was very close to a masterpiece for me. Unfortunately, I just think it could be, I think it could level itself up in terms of like making some of these levels bigger for more exploration, and I think some of the boss fights if the boss fights were more consistent and didn't have some of those design issues that I went over, and the story was also better, then I think I would have been like, yeah, this is a 10 out of 10 game. But let me know what you guys' thoughts on that game were if you've played it. I want to give a shout out to all my Patreons. If you would like to support me on Patreon, it's only $2 a month, and I would appreciate it a lot. I thank you all for watching, and yeah.